Hi everyone. Well, you would have noticed that I haven't done a book review for quite a long time, and that's because it's taken me quite a long while to read this book here, Life Finds a Way by Andreas Wagner. What Evolution Teaches Us About Creativity. And this is a really intelligent book. Might be possibly the most intelligent one I've read, but I don't agree with everything in it. But it really challenged me a lot. I liked a lot of what's in here, most of what's in here, but a few things when he gets onto creativity, I don't think is quite right, but a lot of what he says in that area is right still though. But so it's really a book in two halves, and the first half he gets into, and this is where I kind of found it hard to get into, and to be honest, he probably could have explained it a little bit better. I think his understanding of the concept was very good, but perhaps the explanations, or maybe it's just me, couldn't follow it as well. Might be a reflection on me. But anyway, so it's all about adaptive landscapes, and this was a concept in evolution which I wasn't familiar with, so it was all new to me. And this is a thing that's very hard for us to visualize because we can't think in very many dimensions. We can probably think in 4, and then past there it's a bit of a stretch. But if we look at any organism or set of characteristics, there can be many dimensions involved once you factor in each variable, and how any organism can have a combination of them, and then you look at all of those variables and all of the combinations possible, it can go into so many dimensions we can't imagine it. But to keep it simple, on a three-dimensional plane, imagine a landscape that has peaks and it has troughs and it has lots of middle ground. So a bit like a bit of a hilly terrain. And I prefer to think of them as sweet spots really, rather than peaks and troughs. But a sweet spot is where the going is good. So if an organism evolves towards a sweet spot, so let's say with birds, that might be an insectivore with very short wings that can fly fast. And so an example of that would be a welcome swallow. So if it stays within those parameters, it's a small bird, it's got a wide range of small insects it can eat, and it can swoop and turn really quickly to capture them. So that would be a sweet spot or a peak. So that type of form, bird has evolved towards that. And then you get troughs where things don't work well for any particular organism. And what would be a good example of that? So if you're a glossy black cockatoo and you only have one egg every 2 years, and you only eat on a certain type of food, like virtually your entire diet is the casuarina cones or the seeds, and you just become so specialized that it's a trough. It's not very successful for you. And so what he looks at is, there's a bit of maths in here about the rate at which things can evolve and whether they can get stuck on minor troughs and not actually jump across the landscape. Sorry, stuck on minor peaks, so not a very successful peak. And a good example of that, something I'm seeing around here at the moment, is these oriental dollar birds. Now they're insectivores, but they migrate a great distance from Asia down to Australia each year. And if you look at their wings, they're actually quite, compared to their body, or as a ratio compared to what a welcome swallow has, they're actually quite large wings for the migration. But because they are insectivores, they're not exactly the fastest on the wing at turning and catching insects, because their wings are trying to double for the migratory purpose as well. So this limits them to just above canopies and on the edge of canopies. They're not, they can't turn as quickly, so they're not good in more closed environments the way a whole lot of other insectivores are. Look at a grey fantail, for instance, and how manoeuvrable it is in a woodland or a forested area. So that would be an example of kind of getting stuck on a small peak. What would it take for that bird to evolve to something that is either really good for migration or really good at being an insectivore? And the argument that he makes, which I've got to think more about though, is that, because I either don't understand or I'm not completely convinced by it, but that that natural selection only makes things go one way, and so some of these animals can get, or these lineages can get stuck on a certain small peak without being able to go all the way across to another peak. So, you know, to a greater peak, or to ascend to a greater height and get in the most favourable conditions, or the greatest sweet spot. And yeah, I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, because a lot of mutations are also neutral. They don't confer a great advantage or disadvantage. And, you know, it's natural selection is operating on all of the genome, not just one particular mutation that you're looking at. So I think it's possible to go around other ways, but it may take longer. And so, yeah, I don't know. But look, it's that the adaptive landscape model is something that I think is a great analogy. And I'm really glad that I've learnt that, or, you know, been introduced to that in here. I've downloaded one paper, I'm going to read about it, and I've looked at other web pages and some videos. So I think it's a really good concept to consider, and it's certainly something I've worked into my thoughts now. But then what's really interesting, in the second half of the book, he applies it to creativity. Now, I'm a creative person. I write plays, novels, poetry, music, yeah, and I have been ever since I was little. It's always run hand in hand with the interest in birds and wildlife and science, actually. But and I get some of his analogies, but not all of them. And the funny thing is, to kind of summarize what he's saying about creativity, he has a really good introduction to it when he talks about a study that was done with American Air Force pilots in World War II, and they were trying to work out what the best way, what type of thinking gives you the best solution when the plane is under attack or crashing. And what they found is that there's two types of thinking. One they call divergent and the other convergent thinking. So, and they found out that the smartest people don't come up with the best answers, but there's a bit more to it than that, right? So the divergent thinking is a real creative thinking, where you're faced with a situation and you come up with a huge range of possibilities, and the best answers to those possibilities, the best answer to those situations come out of the divergent thinking. But the problem is the other type of thinking is convergent thinking, where you try and bring something down to a solution really quickly. And so there were pilots who kind of fell into those two camps, and the best solutions were in the divergent thinking. But the problem is you're time limited, you're pushed, so those solutions weren't always able to be expressed. So but they're actually the smarter people in the divergent, not the convergent, but the convergent thinking. It's where you get a whole lot of ideas and you whittle them down to one solution. And because you've got the time pressure of a plane crashing or being attacked, often the solutions that the convergent thinkers would come to weren't the best solutions of all the ones possible. But, you know, that's either partly to do with their thinking and also partly to do with the time pressures that they're under. And so putting that in a creative context, what he's saying is that a lot of creators, and, you know, I can see there's definitely parallels, but there's one thing that I think is missed. So a lot of creators will just wander around and just have lots of different thoughts, and I do that. I'm always just letting my mind wander and developing thoughts for like a play I'm kind of working on at the moment, and another novel, and you just kind of accumulate them over time. But, you know, and so it says the creative process goes through that, and then you have to start to focus it down. And yeah, I see a large degree of truth in that, but somewhere in here, and I wish I'd underline it, somewhere it says it still doesn't explain the creative process or the creative spark or reasoning for it, and the driver. And it gets into how Picasso created that amazing Guernica painting. And, you know, because there were lots of sketches done, and a lot of the process was recorded before he created that painting. And he uses that as an example to back up what he's arguing. And sure, the creative process may mirror that thing of lots of divergent thinking, and then you bring it down. But the one thing which he doesn't get in his Picasso example, and which he just doesn't get generally with the creativity, is what propels you to do it and why you're doing it. And to me, creativity is your own spirit bursting into the world, and that's what drives you. And the process may fall out into the world through a whole lot of divergent stuff, and then you bring it down. But oh look, my battery's just about to run out. Man, it gave me a 5% warning. Just hang on, we don't want this to stop. I'm on a roll. Just wait. Yeah, I'll come back with the power. Yeah, just hold on. Just wait. Okay, so I've plugged the camera back into a battery now. I think that's a Eastern Spine bill I can hear out there, I think. Yeah, so anyway, so the camera's all plugged up. Yeah, where was I? Yeah, you know, creativity, what spurns you on to do it is, you know, what that inner urge is. It's your soul, it's your belief, it's your feelings, it's you know, it's trying to express itself, and it may end up taking the form where it wanders around and slowly focuses in. But yeah, it's anyway. So look, there's definitely a parallel there, but I don't think it explains the motivation of creativity. But it's certainly worth thinking about. And when he gets right at the end, he gets into education systems and what makes like a good company or a good research unit at a university. And there's a lot of parallels with biology. So you need a lot of failure tolerance is what he calls it, which, you know, is quite true. And you need a lot of diversity, and it's really interesting. He talks about diversity, and, you know, we're so used to, you know, the ethnic inclusivity, DEI kind of stuff, but it's actually, you want to pair mathematicians with philosophers and, you know, like all of these different academic backgrounds, and to see what they can come up with. But, you know, obviously there's a big argument for on a cultural basis as well. It's just interesting hearing diversity used as far as schools of thought rather than ethnic backgrounds. But yeah, and so using the biological analogy, this is all about recombination. Just as recombination gives us diversity and new results in genetics, it can in knowledge as well and research. So yeah, I guess it's copying biological systems in some ways. So I think it's really good to take the adaptive landscape analogy over into other fields. But I do think he's a little bit divorced from reality in a few parts. He was right at the end there, he's talking about how businesses, you know, there should be next to no bankruptcy laws, or there should be, well, not next to no, but should be a lot laxer in order to allow more companies to fail. So eventually we can get, you know, some company finds some new great thing and can go with it, but it has a whole lot of failures on the way. But, you know, you've got to think, okay, it's not money, it's people's investment and it's people's lives that are affected by this. I don't think he really understands what money is or how it works. You can't have investment, you can't have bankruptcy without considering who it drags down with it and the knock-on effects in the society. Likewise, talking about immigration and having, so now onto the cultural diversity, having a greater pool of researchers from all around the world working in different areas. And, you know, that, you know, like working in his example in the United States. And that's all fine, but you do have to factor in how much change any society can take. And I'm pro-immigration, but it doesn't mean if you drop the walls of, or the borders of every society or every nation, that suddenly it would be this wonderful great mix. It wouldn't be. It'd be a bloodbath. And so even though there are benefits from a culturally diverse mix, the rate at which that happens is something that has to be considered in how you let it happen, because otherwise you're going to create shockwaves that go the other way, and you'll get a polarization in the society, and you won't get that diverse mixing that you want. So it's got to be done at a rate that that the society can handle. You've got to factor that into your thinking as well, is what I'm saying, which is not done here. Yeah, and there might have been one or two other things I was thinking of that I wanted to bring up, but I really enjoyed the book and I learned a lot from it. I did find it a tough read to begin with, but then as it all kind of fell into place, I could make more sense of it, particularly once we got onto the creativity bit and the fitness landscape or the adaptive landscape was more of an analogy, and I could see once he started applying it in different contexts, I could understand that analogy itself a bit better. So I would recommend it. I do think it's a good book. Yeah, I want to read more about this adaptive landscape thing itself now. And, you know, look, it made me think, a lot of these books, I want to learn about ideas and processes and theories and so on. And there's a lot of waffle in these popular science books. You know, if this content was in a textbook, it might only be 2 or 3 pages. You know, like have the concept explained, have it illustrated graphically, give us some real world examples, tell us what can be done with it. You know, you'd only be looking at a few pages in a textbook, I would expect. This book, I brought this over. This book is the worst book for waffle, which is a shame because there's so many good ideas in this book, and I like this book, and I think it makes some extremely important points. But this is just like an unfocused waffle. No offence, Simon, because it is a good book and you've got some great ideas, some very important ideas here about how important the ecosystem and wildlife is. I mean, obviously plants as well, just to stabilise the living conditions on Earth. But it's unstructured and it's waffle. It's just like, let's write 10 pages every week and then put them all together. I mean, I know it was done better than that, but that's kind of a little bit like it. This book has far more structure, but still a fair bit of waffle in it. And I checked a few reviews the other day for this book, and that's something a lot of people say, is that maybe it's not a whole book in it. But I don't know. Anyway, I still enjoyed it and learned a bit from it. Yeah, there's one bit too where he talks about the Industrial Revolution being brought on by the separating out of science and engineering from some kind of elites. You might have called them religious elites or something. I'm not quite sure, but that was interesting, and I'm sure that's an idea that's been around for a while. I just don't know too much about it. I'd like to read more about that as well. But anyway, so there we go. I would recommend it, but I found it a bit of a steep learning curve at the start, and then I found I could apply that knowledge pretty well throughout it. So yeah, life finds a way. Andreas, still don't know how to pronounce it, Wagner. Now, the next book I'm going to read, which I've been waiting for ages, because I only like reading one book at a time, Biography of Charles Darwin. So I'm really looking forward to this. This will be my holiday reading. Fossils, Finches and Fuegians, Tierra del Fuego, Fuegians, I don't know how to pronounce it, maybe you might know. But anyway, so that's my next book. Historical biographies are always fun to read. But if you've read Life Finds a Way, let us know. Tell me what you think. I certainly benefited greatly from reading it. That's the main thing. Okay, thanks guys. See you then. Bye.